Today, I wanted to cover the canon of statutory construction called the last antecedent. For purposes of statutory construction, the courts and bill drafters use a series of canons to guide them through interpretation issues. These include textual canons, which we term intrinsic aids, as well as linguistic presumptions and grammatical conventions, substantive canons, and extrinsic aids. Now, it's nearly impossible to list all of them, but there are a few common canons that are often useful for legislative bill drafting. Now, we start with the presumption that the legislature drafts its bills carefully and intentionally. And because of this presumption, the usual approach of the judicial branch is to narrow statutes rather than expand them, and the courts are less activist in their interpretation. The rule of the last antecedent is a doctrine of interpretation of a statute by which referential and qualifying phrases, where there's no contrary intention appearing, refer solely to the last antecedent. Now, knowing that explanation may not be necessarily helpful, but this is a rule of statutory interpretation by the courts that's used to determine that qualifying words or phrases refer to the language immediately preceding the qualifier, unless common sense would show that it was meant to apply to something more distant or less obvious to the reader. In other words, the rule of the last antecedent provides that a modifier set off from a series of antecedents by a comma should be interpreted to apply to all of the antecedents. In another way, or put another way, any qualifying words are to be applied to the words or phrases immediately preceding the qualifying word or words and are not interpreted as extending to other words. Now, on a related note, the serial comma rule specifies that in a series of 3 items or more, where each is set off by a comma, each item should be viewed as independent of each other. So here's an example. My favorite ice cream is coffee, comma, mint chocolate chip, comma, and vanilla with chocolate sauce. In this example, the phrase with chocolate sauce should apply just to the vanilla ice cream. Now compare that sentence to the following example. My favorite ice cream is coffee, comma, mint chocolate chip, comma, and vanilla, comma, with chocolate sauce. In this example, the phrase with chocolate sauce would apply to all 3 flavors of ice cream. In order to better address potential problems with lists such as these 2 examples, a bill drafter often changes the list order, put the qualifier at the front of the list, repeats the qualification throughout, or repeats the preposition. If none of these modifications are made, then the rule of the last antecedent will most likely prevail when a court interprets such a statute.